Thank you. It's a real pleasure to get to share some of our work with everybody. I think my job in this session is to share a case study from what we've done in Kansas City in terms of developing an urban tree canopy assessment or regional forestry assessment, and then trying to implement our different policy and planning and design and management kind of recommendations across our metropolitan area in a variety of different ways. So I'll be happy to share our story with you. So the Mid-America Regional Council undertook this effort in a way that's a little different from many of the others that are found around the country. Oftentimes, urban tree canopy assessment exercises are led by cities that are then operationalized through different kinds of city operations. In contrast, MARC is a collaboration of 9 counties and 119 cities in a bi-state area. And so our work is always intended to build different kinds of partnerships and collaborations to advance different kinds of efforts, in this case urban forestry. And really my thesis about our project is we have a lot of trees, and trying to figure out how to conduct more sustainable urban forest management for us has worked best in trying to integrate it into a variety of regional and local planning efforts. And I'll draw that out as I move forward in my presentation. So in our grant, what we did is we received funds from the U.S. Forest Service in partnership with the Kansas Forest Service and the Missouri Department of Conservation. And what we intended to do and what we did was to conduct a regional forestry assessment and then to use that information to formulate a regional policy and planning framework, trying to figure out, well, what do we do with this information to advance it to support the kind of outcomes that we would like to achieve. As part of that effort, we conducted a lot of community education work, and since we completed our assessment a couple of years back, we've moved forward into an implementation phase that I'll share with you as I move forward. It's really interesting. All of our work included a very extensive stakeholder participation process, and the kinds of comments we received are shown on this slide. People love this stuff. Of course they do. Everybody loves trees. And you know, I love the final bullet. Let's take the elevator to the top. There's so many metaphors out there for how do you aspire towards greater outcomes and succeed at ever higher levels. And there's a lot of support for what we're trying to do. And it's people understand urban forestry and trees to be, you know, it's like apple pie and motherhood. It's something that everybody likes, but it turns out to be pretty hard to take it to the next level and implement things. And so we worked very hard at the policy level and the planning level to try and take our findings and recommendations forward. So this map shows really the final outcome of our study, or one of them. We have a ton of trees, right? We have 250 million trees with an average of an 18.6% canopy coverage. So one of the really interesting things is when we broke down our by land use type, there was enormous variability. In all the residential areas, they tend to be well-treed. Maybe we have an average canopy coverage in excess of 40%, whereas in our commercial and transportation and institutional kinds of areas, the number was closer to 10%. So you think about big box stores or large institutional landscapes, transportation corridors. And so that really gave us some guidance about where we want to focus some of our efforts, as you'll. So this was our first stab at really trying to do ecosystem service valuation in our community. And our 250 million trees provide upwards of $320 million a year of benefits relative to air quality, carbon storage, energy conservation, and carbon sequestration. The air quality piece turns out to be a huge driver for us, as are, of course, the other factors. So we have a lot of trees, and what do we do with it, right? I mentioned this question about integration. There's a lot of work that we do at a regional planning agency on energy conservation, on air quality, on stormwater, on transportation, and even at neighborhood level kinds of revitalization efforts. And there's incredible opportunities to begin to tie in our findings into efforts in each of these respective areas. And so it's interesting to think, if we want to increase our canopy coverage, how do we maximize different kinds of co-benefits relative to reducing urban heat islands and conserving energy, or reducing ground level ozone, or improving stormwater quality through more green infrastructure at different geographic scales? And how do we think about transportation corridors using complete and green street kinds of concepts. The context for all of our work is in our region is this plan. It's called Metro Green. It was a plan first developed in 1991, and it's a greenway and green infrastructure plan calling for the development of 1,144 miles of trails and greenways that would serve multiple purposes, from flood risk reduction to water quality improvement to alternative transportation to creating development amenities and community and social connectivity. And of this, maybe the system is about a third built out, so we've made a lot of progress. And these corridors, which drain, these are tributaries to the Kansas and Missouri rivers, really contain about 40% of our forests. And so that's one of our key areas to focus on. And it's a basis for policy making for us that enables us to link green infrastructure and forestry with other community and economic development kinds of concerns. So we have a ton of trees. We've got 250 million trees. What do we do to protect them and to increase the canopy coverage? So as we thought about our policy and planning framework, we started with a general approach of saying, okay, we have a really good forest in our region, but how can we do better? How can we raise the bar? And how can we link forestry to the full range of regional planning efforts that we have underway in our community and in our agency? And transportation historically has been the most significant, but there's other areas related to housing and energy efficiency and air quality that provide a very strong basis for leverage and connection. And then finally, flexible local implementation is really important for us. So we have a lot of different communities, all of which are engaged at different levels with different capacities, different political support, different ecological contexts. And so we recognize the need to come up with different kinds of solutions that are flexible to meet the different needs and priorities in different communities. So two overarching concepts that are important is we talked a lot about urban forestry, but there was a general understanding among our stakeholders that we needed to frame urban forestry within an overarching concept of green infrastructure, and that green infrastructure itself is an integral element of community infrastructure. And second, we need to build upon a very long history of local commitment to trees, and we need to do that in flexible ways. So when I took a look at the Arbor Day Foundation website, there were 34 communities that were Tree Cities USA. And so everybody's very proud. They've got the signs up in their yard. But as I indicated earlier, we really want to raise the bar. So our policy framework is really bifurcated. There's a regional piece and a local piece. And at the regional level, which is the one that I tend to focus on most, there were two main pieces. First, we wanted to set a canopy coverage goal for the region. And it was a tricky thing to do. And we set an aspirational goal because at our agency we don't have operational control over these kinds of issues. So we wanted to try and encourage folks to do more, and the goal setting process was helpful in that regard. Regional planning side, we have a long-range transportation plan that is informed by regional land use planning. We have a regional green infrastructure plan. We have regional air quality plans, and quite a bit of activity in watershed planning. And so there were opportunities to link forestry to all of these elements, as I described. We had received a HUD Sustainable Communities grant a few years ago, focused on redevelopment and targeted activity centers and corridors that looked about, how do we take advantage of existing infrastructure and use smart growth kinds of ideas to spur sustainable redevelopment. And of course, forestry fits hand in glove with all of that, and we've tried to link this to all of the work that's going on in that area. So our regional canopy coverage goal, we set a goal of about 10%, but as I indicated, really a lot of the action is in the areas where there's much less canopy, along some of our transportation corridors, along some of our big box commercial areas, and so it lends itself to very specific kinds of planning conversations in that realm, and on the other side, maybe it's more about education and incentives. If we were to increase our canopy coverage by 10%, we'd get a huge return from that investment in terms of the increased level of ecosystem services. And the air quality and carbon sequestration benefits are called out on this slide. One of the things that's really interesting to me in Kansas City is while we would have to plant a huge number of trees in order to achieve that goal, we actually have a lot of land where that we could use for that purpose. So if we have some 40,000 acres of transportation rights-of-way just along the KDOT and MoDOT corridors, if we were to use 25% of that land, we could accomplish our goal. We have some 225,000 riparian acres in our Metro Green corridors, and if we were to take advantage of those areas where the forests have been fragmented, we could meet our goals. And we have huge areas of parking lots in our region, maybe some 100 square miles, and those are places where we could effectively turn parking lots into parks, if you will, or forests. While I haven't had the ability to do this yet, there certainly are a lot of institutional properties, hospitals, schools, and other places in the landscape that lend themselves to forestry kinds of endeavors. So that's the regional piece that I want to describe. So on the regional side, we're trying to integrate forestry into all these different threads of work. And on the local side, we are trying to come up with a practical, flexible implementation strategy. And what we did is we divided the kinds of work into 4 categories that included policy and planning, design, operations and maintenance, and education and engagement. So this matrix shows a few illustrations, if you will, of things that could be done both at the regional and local scale. I want to walk you through the local side, the right-hand column of this frame. So if we're thinking about policy and planning, all of our communities have tree ordinances or tree replacement ordinances, but I think we found that there's a lot of opportunities to enhance those so that they become more effective in achieving very specific, locally defined policy goals relative to managing and maintaining or restoring urban forests. And so to that end, for example, held workshops where we've looked at model ordinances and worked with local to try and improve the ordinances in ways that were useful to them. On the urban design side, I mentioned Metro Green, our regional plan, and that plan has been adopted essentially by every local jurisdiction in our metro. And so there's opportunities at the local level to look at those corridors and other stream corridors or other natural areas or places in the landscape of interest and think about how to manage the forest in those contexts. One of the specific areas of opportunity for us has been in the realm of stormwater management. Like many communities, we adopted a best management practices manual for stormwater to protect water quality. And when we think about sustainable site design, protecting existing vegetation, urban forestry, concepts fit hand in glove inside of that. And we've worked very hard to try and highlight those sorts of opportunities so that the folks in the stormwater engineering and comprehensive planning kinds of communities could consider those opportunities and incorporate them into policies and plans and review processes. On the operations and maintenance side, this is one of the real rubs, is that many of our local communities lack the resources to do a lot of, to take care of the forests that they have. And so there's huge opportunities we've found to create partnerships with the volunteer organizations and community-based groups to try and share the work a little bit. And on the regional side, I think what we've hypothesized is that there's a huge opportunity there for workforce development and job creation for forestry and green infrastructure more broadly to grow plants and care of them and to manage those landscapes. And that takes me into the final area of education and engagement, where there's opportunities to engage our communities and our citizens, our residents, our businesses in terms of helping them understand what opportunities are for planting and management, and to plant more trees and to take care of them. One of the groups that I'd like to highlight here is Heartland Tree Alliance, a nonprofit that was born out of an ice storm over a decade ago that really took a huge toll on our community. Much of Kansas City was without power for about 5 days. And so this alliance of utilities and communities, just a whole variety of organizations came together through this nonprofit organization, and they teach classes and recruit volunteers to plant and manage trees in a way that's been enormously successful. So as I indicated, we try and take advantage of local best practices and highlight those and create opportunities for our communities to learn from each other. And so there's a variety of case studies that we highlighted. I know that it always works best in our community where we start from where there's already a capacity and an interest and a proven strength and try and grow from there. And so, you know, Kansas City, Missouri did quite a lot of work on its tree ordinance. Overland Park, Kansas has very detailed design standards for both its urban forests and its stormwater practices. Liberty has a wonderful partnership. Liberty, Missouri has a partnership with its school district and other community organizations that are engaged in taking care of their urban forest. The City of Raymore has a recently developed tree protection plan that's very comprehensive and looking at its whole community. I had already mentioned the Heartland Tree Alliance that has a very high level of volunteerism and working communities throughout our metro area. And Johnson County, Kansas, our Parks and Recreation Department, passed a biodiversity policy for the management of their public land. Certainly relates to and strengthens and reinforces all of the urban forestry work that they're engaged in. I didn't, at the beginning of my presentation, I neglected to mention all of the partners that were involved. Our funding came from the U.S. Forest Service in partnership with the Kansas Forest Service and Missouri Department of Conservation. Davie Resource Group conducted all of the field work for it. David Nowak and his team at the Forest Service Research Station in Syracuse helped us with all of the modeling work. And we've worked closely with the Heartland Tree Alliance, among other community organizations, to try and move forward on implementation kinds of measures. So I will wind up my presentation there. This is my contact information, and I think it will be shared again with you later in the presentation. And all of our project materials are available at our website at mark.org. So with that, I'm happy to conclude, and I'll be happy to answer any questions at the end of the session.